Hello and welcome back to Particular Pixels. I'm Shelling and this is my review of Star Wars Squadrons for PC. So I was a big fan of the original X-Wing, TIE Fighter and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter games. I absolutely love them. So the news of, dare I say, a spiritual successor had me pretty excited. I haven't been interested in an EA published title for quite a while now for numerous reasons. But Star Wars Squadrons look to have potential, and add to that the fact that the game would not contain any microtransactions and was not a live service left me cautiously optimistic. After having spent around 15 to 20 hours with the game so far, I must say I've come away with a relatively good impression of it. However, I do have one major concern which I'll get into a little bit later in the review. There are three modes in the game, a campaign and two multiplayer modes. The campaign is basically a glorified tutorial across 14 missions, 16 if you include the prelude missions. You'll be switching between the Rebel Alliance, Vanguard Squadron, and the Empire, Titan Squadron, while learning the various game systems and becoming familiar with the 8 available ships that can be piloted. You do get to create a character at the start, but the selection is pretty anemic, if I have to be honest. But it doesn't really matter since this is a space combat game, not a role-playing game. As far as story goes, though, it's really nothing special. An Empire commander defects and joins the rebels and then tries to create a new weapon, the Skyhawk, to defeat the Empire. Between each mission, you'll get to talk to various squad mates at the base. You don't actually get to walk around in the base, and your character is a silent protagonist. You can only look around and interact with the squad mates. That's if they have something to say to you, or outfit your ship, or get your own briefing. There's basically two rooms available, if I could describe it that way. It really does seem to me that this section was designed with VR in mind. It doesn't affect the gameplay experience though, so it is what it is, I suppose. The story itself is possible, but the writing for your squad mates is really just awful. These characters lack any kind of personality, charm, or interesting dialogue, and as a direct result, I didn't really care about any of them or what they had to say in the slightest. While it doesn't ruin the experience because you can't just skip all this dialogue, it doesn't add to it either. So there really are no memorable or impacting moments throughout the campaign, which is unfortunate. The missions themselves are run of the mill, nothing new here either. Go here, destroy that, escort this. Nothing groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination. But the core gameplay is excellent, so these end up being enjoyable to play regardless. And depending on what difficulty setting is used and what your player skill level is, I would imagine for most folks their campaign's going to likely last between 8 to 12 hours, give or take. There may be some replayability if you do want to get all the medals for each mission or you want to play the game on harder difficulties. Needless to say, though, the focus of Squadrons is definitely not the campaign. And I'll say that if your sole reason to purchase the game is for the solo campaign, I think that you're perhaps going to be a little bit disappointed. So multiplayer is the main focus of the game, and the developers have been pretty upfront about that. There are two modes, basically dogfight and the flagship mode called Fleet Battles. Dogfight is a 5 versus 5 mode with no capital ships and no AI fighters. The first team to 30 points or the team with the highest score when the timer runs out wins, and that's basically it. There are occasional resupplies that appear in the area and can be collected to refill your missiles and repair your ship, after which it goes on cooldown. Now, I did find this a little bit odd because it breaks immersion due to its gaminess. I mean, you're collecting what is essentially a power-up. It feels out of place. I would have preferred that they just had a frigate that can resupply you at the edge of the map for each side, similar to the ones that you find in fleet mode, in fleet battle mode. Or alternatively, just have one of your support team choose a ship to fill that role. And I think this would have encouraged more teamwork. The mode is fun, but due to it only being about kills and not really requiring actual teamwork, it feels kind of shallow and as a result lacks the draw to remain interesting, at least for me. It's a good mode to warm up in though. However, I think that if you want a more authentic Star Wars experience, then Fleet Battles is definitely the way to go. In Fleet Battle mode, each side starts with a capital ship and two frigates, if you're the Rebels, or two cruisers, if you're the Empire. And at the start of each round, each team is essentially attempting to fill a morale meter by getting kills. Once the meter is filled, they are able to attack the enemy's frigates or cruisers, eventually taking down their shields and destroying them. During this time, the enemy needs to basically defend their ships, destroy the enemy raider ship, which appears once they're on the attack, and also then get AI kills and try to regain morale and fill the bar to their side by killing enemy pilots and other AI. And once the morale meter fills, it switches sides, and then the other team gets to attack, and they get a raider AI ship spawning as well to help them on their offensive. It is possible to attack frigates and cruisers outside of this period, for example, when you're actually defending, but it's not really advisable since you'll likely just be feeding the enemy team with morale, which will allow them to attack for longer. Once these frigates and cruisers have been taken down, your team can then begin attacking the enemy's capital ship. And unlike the smaller ships, the MC-75 for the Rebels and the Star Destroyer for the Empire have subsystems: a power generator, 2 shield generators, and a targeting system. Taking these down will make for a significantly easier assault because once these are destroyed, they are gone for the rest of the match. And these large ships also have tractor beams as well as an array of turbo lasers, missile launchers, and turrets, all of which can also be destroyed. The match is basically over as soon as one of the team's capital ships is destroyed. In addition to all of this, Fleet Mode has tons of AI fighters flying around, which makes this feel like more of a large-scale battle. They aren't particularly tough and they don't pose a significant threat, but they can kill you if you're not careful. They do award much less morale than enemy player kills, but it does eventually add up. And I think that the tug of war that happens in this mode adds a sense of progression and tension and keeps it interesting and enjoyable even if you end up losing the match. It's essentially a battle of attrition, and the matches can last upwards of, say, 30 minutes. There are a total of 6 maps in Squadrons, all of which are pretty different in their own right and add their own navigational challenges, which is certainly nice. At its core, though, Squadrons is a 5v5 PvP game, and each team has a choice of 4 ships, 3 attack craft, and 1 support craft, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Each of these ships has 7 components that can be switched out to further customize the build. So you can set up your ship to be more effective at taking down larger ships, or have more health, or go faster, or specialize in close quarters dogfights and that kind of thing. In theory, no one mod is better than another since each has pros and cons, but like any multiplayer game, players are inevitably going to find builds that are overpowered or exploitable, which I think is already happening in Squadrons, and I think will most certainly require some balancing tweaks from the developers. Each ship has a primary fire, 2 secondary gadgets, so something like repair droid or missiles or mines, etc. These can be chosen in any combination, and each ship also has an anti-missile device. There is also a power management system in the game, much like the one found in something like X-Wing or even Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen. If you are playing the Rebels, you can choose to focus it on engines, weapons, or shields. If the engine power is max, you will accumulate boost. If the weapons are max, you gain extra damage, which they refer to as overcharge. And if the shields are max, you basically get double shields. In addition, you can choose to have the shields focus on the front or the back, or balance between both. Playing as the Empire is slightly different since 3 of the 4 ships don't actually have shields, but you do have the ability to shunt power from the engines to the weapons or vice versa, allowing Imperial pilots to quickly refill their boost or overcharge their weapons, making up for their lack of shields. These differences do require varied approaches to combat. You can't fly the ships the same way. And while boost is self-explanatory, there is an option to drift if there is boost available. And this basically enables pilots to make sharp or even 180-degree turns mid-flight. It takes a little bit of practice to be certain, but when you've got a good grip on this, it can make a significant difference in combat. Learning all of the nuances of when and how to use these systems is crucial to being a successful pilot, getting more kills, and dying less frequently. The game thankfully has a decently high skill ceiling. It is relatively easy to get up and going, but will take time and practice to master. All in all, though, the combat in Star Wars Squadrons is excellent in my opinion. The controls are responsive and it feels very rewarding to get kills and gradually improve. It may not be as deep as something like Elite, but it's certainly deep enough to not feel like an arcade game. I think it strikes a balance somewhere in between, perhaps edging closer to the original X-Wing. The game can be played with a mouse and a keyboard, a gamepad, or a HOTAS. They all work, but I use my Logitech X56. For me, the sheer amount of buttons would have been a nightmare with the gamepad, at least for the level of control that I wanted with my ship. At launch, the game had some serious issues with many of the HOTAS setups though. Some setups weren't being detected at all. Certain axes didn't work on others, and most suffered from a massive dead zone issue requiring a workaround in order to play properly. This has thankfully been fixed. There are a ton of buttons that can be customized and can pretty much all be changed, which was nice to see. Regarding VR, unfortunately, I no longer have my review unit for the Rift S, so I was unable to test VR, but there are reports of performance issues and crashes for VR users currently. Another issue that is still present, at least for me, is a refresh rate bug. So running at a refresh rate anything higher than 60 causes the game to run at what feels like 30 frames a second. It's very jarring and not really playable. So until that is fixed, I've basically kept my frames a second to 60. I suspect this is the reason VR users are having performance issues, since VR runs between 80 to 120 frames a second in most cases, depending on the headset that you are using. For those of you who play other sims and use Track IR or alternative head tracking solution like me, you're out of luck, as it's not currently and will probably not be supported in the future. What makes this more annoying is the free look option is locked behind the toggle, and once it's enabled, you lose control of the ship. So either you look around or you fly around. You can't do both unless you're playing in VR, of course. And hence emulating mouse look with head tracking will not work either. It's kind of odd since the game natively supports VR and has the ability to allow looking and flying around at the same time. I can't imagine it would be difficult to implement head tracking, so I don't know, hopefully the community will find a workaround for this. One final issue with the game that is pretty common actually are players dropping or leaving mid-match. Fleet battles are considered ranked, and if any player leaves during the match, it's no longer counted towards your rank progress. So long matches can feel like a little bit of a waste of time. I really hope this issue gets sorted out, because this is one sure way to make players feel like they're just wasting their time and put out any desire they have to play the game. Overall though, I've really enjoyed Star Squadrons so far, but my biggest concern is definitely longevity. The campaign is short, dogfight mode is pretty shallow, and fleet battle mode has only 6 maps. In addition, the developers have already stated there will be no further content released for the game. It would have been great if there was a larger selection of modes and maps, or new modes coming, for example. The game has a lot of potential, it really does, but I fear due to its lack of content, it's eventually going to fade away to make room for another microtransaction infested live service full of surprise mechanics that nobody wants, and it's a shame. Even though Star Wars Squadrons is not a full-price AAA title, I'm still not convinced a game that's essentially one mode with 6 maps is actually worth the asking price of $40 unless you're a super fan. I do, however, think it's worth picking up at some point, especially if you've enjoyed X-Wing or are looking for a deeper Star Wars battle experience than what's currently available, but I would still suggest waiting for a sale. Anyway, those have been my impressions of Star Wars Squadrons. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and as usual, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. I've been Xiaoling, and I'll see you guys next time.